They log in. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. My name is Shay. I am the community manager here at Parsec, and we're really glad to have you all join us here for this amazing webinar that we'll be having today. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, our sessions are always recorded. You will receive an email with both the recording and the slides. And then we really do encourage engagement. So feel free to use the chat to introduce who you are, share where you're from, share reactions, drop questions, and then we'll have some time for Q&A before we close out. Now, a little bit about our session today. If you've been with us for our Harmful Language series last year, we appreciate you all for joining that, and we thank you for being here today. Your questions, your honesty has really made these conversations richer for us, and so today's session is just a continuation of that same spirit. We are going to be joined today by Joshua Wolf, who is the middle school principal at the Park School of Baltimore. Him and his team have spent the last couple of years building and launching a school-wide initiative called the Weight of Words, I'm sorry. And so today he's going to walk us through what that journey has looked like. He's going to talk through the origin, what has been the wins, what has been the learnings, and then share some practical tools that you all can start to use actually like today. And so we're excited to have him on here. We know how harmful language is affecting our school systems. And so being able to have Josh just generously offer to share his knowledge, his guidance, and his slides, we're really grateful for. So as I pass it on to Josh, just be mindful that we know that this is a really hard topic. And so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in our chat. But with that, Josh, I'm going to pass it on to you so we can start our webinar.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome, everyone. I really appreciate you taking time. Well, wait a minute. I'm on the East Coast, so it's 1 o'clock my time, and this is 1:12, 11, so 10 in the morning. But I appreciate everyone taking the time from their day. I know that school leaders are busy, and so I want to make this next hour as useful as possible. Today, I really want to share how and why we built our Weight of Words program. It's a curriculum to help students understand the power of language, really in an effort to get them to use language wisely and compassionately, which I know is not easy. Before I begin, I just have two reminders, I guess, and one disclaimer. Next slide. So I know it's easy for workshop presenters to say, just do what we've done at our school. I know that never works, right? Every school has its own ecosystem. There's no such thing necessarily as best practices because what works in one place doesn't work in another school. Um, we all have varying cultures and budgets and student and parent body and schedules. So it is not easy to imitate what other schools have done. And yet there are definitely school steps that schools can take. And so I hope that I'm offering some usable, I guess, guidelines. But definitely take what you can, even if it's just one takeaway from today, then it's worth it. Um, Feel free to adapt or borrow anything that you hear today. Okay, so next slide. Also, Shay already said the deck will be shared, and please, as you text into the chat, or if when we get into breakout rooms, please respect confidentiality. We want to make sure that what we say here stays here. Okay. So a little context for this Weight of Words program. So I'm in an
I'm in an
independent
independent.
school in Baltimore. And I noticed at my very first faculty meeting that this was a different kind of place, that it was a student-centered environment. I noticed immediately that there was what I would call great faculty agency. Most initiatives came from the faculty and really required faculty buy-in to be successful. This was very different from a public school that I'd come from the year before. Um, Having come from a public school, I began my first year at Park with a very strict approach to classroom management. I gave students assigned seating the moment they walked into the door, weekly quizzes, and it was definitely effective. And while I did stop wearing a coat and tie to school, I did remain committed to sort of holding a high standard, no matter who was in my classroom. What became clear as I learned about what and how my colleagues taught in their own classrooms was was the school's commitment to social justice and civic engagement. And that was very much a part of the culture here. There was definitely a desire, not simply to teach concepts and skills, but also really to help students become active members of a democratic society. And that's part of our school's mission. And, engage citizens beyond the classroom. So, next slide, please. So the summer after I was a teacher for 17 years, and then I was an interim principal for a year. And that summer after that interim year, I participated in a 5-day intensive summer professional development uh, project that was called the Race FACA. I put the red pill there for those of you that are Matrix fans, right? Neo, the protagonist in the Matrix, takes the red pill, and the world melts away, and he sees the way things really are out there. So this was a red pill experience for me. It was a week of intense conversations and exercises focused on racism, racial identity development, implicit bias, a lot of time thinking about whiteness. And I'm embarrassed to say that this was really the first time. I think I was 41 or 42 at the time. It was the first time in my life that I was confronted very directly with how clueless I was about the experience of the Black and brown teachers and students at my school. Not that I was unaware of bias or racism. I mean, I've been studying and reading and talking about it, especially as a teacher and a school leader, but I really was a bit clueless about the toll that daily microaggressions were having, not just on the young people in my classroom, but also on my colleagues, on the adults in the community as well, and the role that I was playing in that. So, next slide. So that was a powerful experience. Several years later, I went back to graduate school and I read a book called Whistling Vivaldi by Claude Steele. This is a book about stereotype threat. And I introduced to this idea of what he calls identity contingencies. And this is an idea that students will perform much worse if they are reminded of stereotypes about their own identities, right? In particular, as it relates to school. So, for example, a stereotype is that girls are not as good in math as boys. And so when a female student is reminded that she's a girl in a math class right before taking a test, and that might be with a teacher who says, "Oh, I love that dress." It could be just a little comment that reminds her that she's a girl and she's in math class and she's about to take a test, and the stereotype is sort of built in. It's wired. We've grown accustomed to them. It actually will impact how she performs in that test. She'll perform worse. And the same could be true for Asian students, even if the stereotype is that they will perform better in math than others. So simply reminding students of their race or their class or gender or their age can impact their performance negatively if those same identities are associated with a stereotype. So I was beginning to pay much closer attention to language and the power of language, especially when, as teachers, we say them nonchalantly at an assembly or with a group of kids, but those words have great power and they resonate and they ultimately impact not just engagement, but performance. So, next slide, please. So the year after that, a group of my teachers did a summer like a summer professional development, and they read Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And they were so moved by this book that they decided, or they brought it to me and said, "Josh, we got to spend more time. We would love it if the whole faculty could read this book." And so we made it the centerpiece of our faculty meetings that year, and we devoted eight meetings that year to learning about belonging in the brain. And this was a huge step for me and for the faculty, really to learn the science behind belonging, right? To understand how all the things that undermine belonging, like if you embarrass a student in front of the class, if you call a kid out and they get embarrassed, that actually inhibits their ability to learn because the amygdala part of their brain gets hijacked. They don't actually see or hear anything. That can also happen in a hallway right before kids walks into your room. If their amygdala gets hijacked, they're not going to see or hear anything that you say in those first 15 or 20 minutes of the class. So really tuning into what language triggers the amygdala that renders kids unable to learn in those first 20, 25 minutes was really important for teachers if you're expecting to use those first 20 minutes to teach. And I think so. We love this book. And Kim from Parsec, you're on the call. we're going to offer copies of this book at the end. Is that right?
We are indeed going to do
Okay,
so.
awesome. Awesome. Okay, so I highly recommend that. But that was a turning point for us as a faculty. All right, so next slide, please. Um, the purpose of schools, right, is to teach young people the skills they need to learn and live in an environment where they feel seen, heard, and loved, right? And so we have to understand how the brain plays itself, how the way the brain is wired, and how it impacts the way students process information, words being the primary way that we process information. Okay. So next slide. So what I want to share with you are some initiatives that we launched at school to help build the belonging and also take care of the language that we're using with kids. Um, After we reading Hammond's book, right, we launched a couple of these initiatives over the next few years with the goal of affirming students, setting really clear expectations, and creating an environment where every student felt like they belong. So it started with my opening assembly of the year, and I would have an opening assembly, and then a week later something called harassment assembly because I wanted the kids to understand what constituted harassment and bullying. I ended up combining these two into one assembly and changed the name to the kindness assembly. And this gave me an opportunity to introduce the kids at the very beginning of the year to our core values, which are kindness, respect, and a commitment to growth and learning. Anything that undermines kindness or respect or a commitment to growth and learning is not allowed at school. And that's basically the only rule that we need. And so I wanted to articulate those with the kids. Those are things that we repeat over and over again all year long. And I also wanted to introduce to them the concepts of persistent, pervasive, and severe. Because kids are always wondering, well, who gets in trouble or why would I get into trouble or what's bullying? And so it's a very clear definition. Any disruptive behavior that is persistent, pervasive, or severe is behavior that we have to address, right? We're not talking about a one-off or an argument between friends. It has to be one of those three, right? I also introduced the concepts of intention versus impact because kids always say, well, I didn't mean to, or I was just joking around. We say, well, that's fine if you were just joking around, but the impact was real, and that's what we're going to address. So it's very important that kids understand the terms. And of course, these are words that we repeat over and over and over again all year long, so that if they ever do get into trouble or make a mistake, we can say, look, let's talk about impact and not intention. And the goal is to promote really upstanding culture. So that was a new initiative to start the year with an assembly and then introduce some vocabulary, which we would then reiterate over the course of the year. We also launched our AAA program. So AAA stands for Affinity, Alliance, and Advocacy Groups. And we made this mandatory. Every single middle school student had to be part of an affinity group or an affinity alliance or an advocacy group. Not all students wanted to be in affinity group. So, we have a Black male forum, Black female forum. We have Pacific Asian Islander umbrella. We have a Jewish affinity group. So we have 14 different AAA groups, and kids choose the one that they want to be in. And what we learned is that once kids are in affinity groups, those become very different kinds of spaces, and they're much more willing to be open and honest about what they're experiencing in school when they're with that close affinity group. An example of an advocacy group. So we have Baltimore, a group that's called Baltimore Advocacy, and they learn about Baltimore City. That they take field trips. They learn about issues that are affecting the city, and so every group has a point and a purpose, and we found it to be a very successful program, not just for building connections between kids, but also opening up lines of communication. We also, my dean of students is like a expert in restorative practices, and we started using that for our discipline and making sure that the discipline was restorative, which is really about building relationships, and it did not feel punitive. And this had a big impact because kids were more willing to talk about things that they had done, and then they could bring advocates into the room, and they walked out of that room being able to tolerate one another, but they weren't bitter or angry. And that's I'm really oversimplifying what restorative practices do, but it's a really was an important investment, and we've seen a change in the way kids respond to what I'm going to call discipline, right? We also started to track our discipline. So, who was getting in trouble, their grade, their age, their gender, because we wanted to make sure that the kids getting that it reflected our demographic and that they weren't skewed or biased. Um, and then that last image there on the right is an image I just came across actually last year, which I refer to as the braid. And it's this idea that for schools to succeed, we need two things paired. We need academic belonging and social and emotional belonging. And by academic belonging, I mean kids need to be challenged, they need to be pushed. We have to teach that sweet spot, which is someplace between pushing them too hard and they're overwhelmed and give up, and not enough so that they're bored and say, this is dumb, right? It's got to be right in the middle where they're pushed really hard, but not so hard that they break. So that's academic belonging. The social belonging is all the things I've been talking about, making sure kids feel seen, heard, loved, affirmed, feel like the adults know who they are, really care about them. And those two go together. You can't have a great school without both working in tandem. So that is something that we've really been focusing on in the last few years is the academic piece because we felt like with the launch of AAA programs, the social belonging and the restorative practices, social belonging is a strength here, but we also wanted to make sure that the academic piece was up to par. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm sorry for speaking so quickly. There's a lot to talk about. So the thing about vision, right? And I know that I've shared some of the initiatives we've built to promote academic belonging, but I want to make a note about kind of vision. And it might seem like there was a grand plan to build community through all of these initiatives at Park, but that is just not how it worked. When I started as the principal, I really just wanted the trains to run on time. I wanted to improve what I could. But as for building belonging, I really did not have a sense of what we specifically needed to change. It wasn't until a small group of teachers approached me with this idea. They said, "Josh, we want to read this book this summer. It got a great review. Can we do it?" And they said, "Yeah, great, do it." And then they came back at the end of the summer and said, "This book blew our brain. We all got to do this." Um, and I said, okay, let's do it. I mean, it was really a passive decision on my part. They were excited, and who was I to say no? What I did not realize is that sometimes the best thing to do is anything, just anything at all. Just take a first step. Just try something new. Go on a suggestion from some passionate teachers and see where it leads. Um, uh, Next slide. Um, so you can never know where the next step is actually going to take you. And I think of this as ladders and levels, right? You climb one ladder, you try something new, and what you find is that that experience takes you to another place, a different place, a new level of understanding where there are other opportunities that will present themselves. Those are other ladders, right? Other ladders, other perspectives that you like looking out the window. Next slide, please. And each time you take a chance and do something bold at school, whether it succeeds or not, you are learning and your people are learning, and this will present you with new perspectives and new windows of understanding and more options for growth. Next slide. So, each time we tried something, I mean, what I showed you was a slide that looked like it had four initiatives on it or eight initiatives, but those things happened slowly, piecemeal, one at a time, haphazard, and you look back and you're like, what a great program builder. But it never happens that way, right? Each time we tried something to, it prompted us to do something else that either better or differently. Okay. So next slide, please. So I thought we were doing really well. I mean, I thought I was like, Josh, you're a pretty good principal. We've built some great program. Kids feel like they belong. Kids are challenged. Everything's going really well. And then we last year had a really tough year, what I would call an inflection point. Um, I, I mentioned that our AAA groups really helped us to create more intimate spaces with kids, where kids would feel more comfortable, and particularly, sharing what was happening in their lives. They built those relationships with those mentors, and they had mentors that they trusted, And at our bi-monthly AAA meetings, students began to share some of the not so nice behavior that they were experiencing at school. So they had these great trusting relationships. They started telling the adults, well, these are the things that are actually happening in school. And next slide, please. So this is some of the feedback that we heard from our AAA mentors. So black student walking down the hallway heard a white student say, "Oh, are you in the cool kids club?" Which is I didn't know this is a reference to the KKK as made as a joke. That came up. I'm the mentor of the Jewish Affinity Group. A student in my group said that they were in the cafeteria and someone called him a greedy Jew. Had another situation that was shared. Two white kids walking down the hallway holding a basketball, and they walk past a black kid, and the eighth grader tosses the ball to the sixth grader and says, "Go live your dream, bro." Um, I then met with the Girl Power group. That's one of our affinity group spaces. It's like 17, 18 girls, just to find out how the year was going. And they were like, they said, "Mr. Wolf, you wouldn't believe some of the comments that boys say to us in the hallway or in the cafeteria." And they gave me a whole list. This was one of them. Go back to your kitchen. This is like 2026, kids making comments to each other like this. Ching Ching making comments to a Chinese student with this making the slanted eyes. And then this last one is just amazing. It's just incredible. There was a black student doing a performance on a black mathematician, Benjamin Banneker, and he said Benjamin Banneker, and a student said Ban what? As if to try to prompt the student to say the end word of Banneker, the second part of Banneker, which sounds like the N word. And so these were things that were happening pervasively at school, which we only found out about because we had built AAA programs so that our teachers were finding out about it. And so so next slide, please. When this was shared, so first this was shared with me as the principal and the dean, and then we shared this with the faculty, and we realized we really needed to wrap our brains around this. So we surveyed all the students. Next slide, please. And this was what we heard from the students. They do not feel safe when others use harmful language. They do not trust the way the community or our adults handle situations when others use harmful language. And they continue to hear harmful language and see harmful actions that go unreported and without response and consequences. And if that's not an indictment of your administration, I don't know what is. Next slide, please. And this was just a comment I pulled from one of the surveys. I wish other kids knew what it felt like to hear those words used. It hurts. And so it was pretty clear we need to do something. Next slide, please. And so these are four things that we started this year. Okay. And again, these came in at different stages, and but I want to walk through them. And the fourth one is this Weight of Words program, which I know that this is what you all want to hear. I hope all of this context sort of lays the groundwork for how and why we got here. So the first is we launched incident reporting form. We'd had this before, but we did it in a very formal way. This is a form, it's a Google form that kids can fill out where they talk about harmful language that they heard, where they were, who said it. Just a slightly more formal way of reporting. And this link is on every teacher's Google Classroom page. We also have posters around the school. And you do need an adult to fill it out. You can't just go and fill it out anonymously. So we do encourage kids to go to an advisor or go to their AAA mentor and fill it out. And so it's strengthened bonds between the student and the adult. But now everything gets reported to our dean and our DEI director. And so as soon as they come through, we can respond right away. And it's not happening, we're not finding out about it like 4 months later, which was happening last year. The second is I used an AI interface called PlayLab. Some of you might be familiar with it, and I built a like an AI assistant to help our teachers find and eliminate bias in their report card narratives. So we write narratives at the bottom of all of our report cards. We don't even know what stereotypes or what bias is filters through our language. And so teachers can paste it in and it will tell them what bias is there and it will remove it so that we know that our language is not, having a negative impact on parents or on students. So we launched that this year. We also started to be a little bit more deliberate about community circles, which is just another way of like using restorative practices in your advisory groups to build rapport, just taking some time sitting with kids talking about topics that might either be funny or important, or talking about their weekend, but just engendering more dialogue where kids sit across from each other, look into each other's eyes, and talk about who they are. And we launched, Weight of Words, and now I'll talk through that piece there. So next slide. Um, I knew I wanted to do something that addressed the language. I didn't quite know what to do. Fortunately, at our school, we have something called FACA, FACA. It stands for Faculty and Curricular Advancement. Our school pays has a sort of like a fund, and they pay teachers to do work in the summer to build curriculum because it's too hard. Professional development during the year, I mean, we try, but we don't have the bandwidth to really sink our teeth into anything new. And so our school pays teachers to work in the summer. And so I presented this idea to faculty. Let's take 5 days and let's build this program. Don't know what it will be, but we'll figure it out this summer. And I got 8 teachers to sign on with me, and we actually built the program, and then we launched it this September. Next slide, please. The challenge for us, and I imagine this is the challenge at all schools, one with the time. Where in the world are you going to put new curriculum? It's not like there's no time in the day. So where are you going to put it? And the other was the expertise, right? The confidence. I have a math teacher that says I was hired to teach math. I'm not hired to monitor student language and talk about what's harmful language. Like that's out of my area of expertise, and that was true for a lot of our teachers. And so what we knew is we didn't. This wasn't just a curriculum for kids. This also had to be for the faculty. We had to practice disrupting harmful language ourselves as adults, and we had to build that into our faculty meetings and everything. So next slide, please. We also really had to acknowledge up front that middle school kids, and I'm imagining that you all are from different sort of divisions, lower, middle, and upper. But and this is true developmentally of all ages, but with middle school kids in particular, well, they're all works in progress, and they really lack the life experience to truly understand cause and effect, and to understand the impact of their actions on themselves and on others. And we knew that no matter how good this program is that we build, we're not going to see immediate change, right? We are playing the long game, and we're all doing that as adults. We're planting seeds that we hope that when they get to be 15 or 18 or 24 or 36, that they become these good human beings that are careful with language. And that's what we're doing now in our roles and responsibilities at schools. We're planting lots of seeds that we hope blossom in the future. So we're aware of that. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read this. Take a minute to read that slide. This is the rationale for this project. Go ahead and take a minute to read that. Okay. So that was the proposal there. And next slide, please. And this was a description of how we were going to spend our time. Um, we knew that we didn't have when we launched this experience, we were not going to have we weren't creating we didn't have any time to work with. So we had to embed it in time that was already in the schedule. So you'll see in that first sentence, class meetings, we already have class meetings that are scheduled as part of our community time. House is what we call homeroom or advisory, and kids meet in homeroom 5 days a week. So house already existed. Assemblies, we already had on the books 2 assemblies per month. AAA, we already had on the books as part of our community time. And then our social studies and language arts teachers said they would be willing to use some of their class time for this program. So we had the time was already there. We just had to reconfigure how we were going to use it. Okay. And, this is how we spent the week in discussions and putting together lesson plans, putting together the material. Okay. Next slide, please. This is an overview of this Weight of Words curriculum. Um, We wanted to plan some kind of experience for each month. Those you can see are the main topics. So norm setting, power, language, microaggressions, just joking, and then the disruption. Next slide, please. So we surveyed the kids in August, right when school started, because we're going to survey them again at the end, and we want to see what kind of progress we've made. Norm setting is something that every teacher in our school does anyway, right? At the very first week of school, they come in, we talk about what makes a great learning environment, and we have the kids brainstorm. It's everything from raise your hand and listen to other people as like coming to class on time and make sure you have your materials. So we've always done that individually in individual classes, but this year we did it as a grade level, which I know sounds crazy, right? Bring the whole entire sixth grade, and our we have about 70 kids per grade level. So probably you all probably have much larger classes. I don't know how class sizes and how feasible this is, but we were able to manage this and have the kids talk about what makes a great learning environment, and then we pulled together their responses and put it on one page, reviewed it with them again, and then had them sign. And so now in every classroom on the wall, we have the sixth grade norms and responsibilities, seventh grade and eighth grade. And that way, when kids violate those norms, we can say, look, you all or we together agreed that this is what it takes to have a great school environment. You violated those norms, and let's talk about it there. So it doesn't feel like it's top down. It's really the kids that came up with the norms themselves. So we did that in September. Um, in October, in our social studies classes, introduced kids to the idea of power. And our social studies teachers printed out 25 images of different people. Some were people that they knew, the President of the United States, LeBron James, Beyonce, and others were pictures from things that are happening geopolitically in the world. So they couldn't tell who that individual was, but they could see that it wasn't the United States. And so 25 images, and we asked them, put these in order from who has the most power to who has the least. It was interesting to see who kids put. Every single group put President Trump at the very top of power, and then you'd be surprised how high LeBron and Beyonce actually are. And then we asked, what does that mean? What does it mean that Beyonce has a lot of power? How do you know Beyonce? No. Well, then where's the power come from? Well, her lyrics. Her lyrics are powerful, and I listen to her lyrics, and it changes the way I think about the world. And so we wanted to get kids talking about power and how is it that someone that you've never met has power over you? How about someone just by looking at an image? So that led us to November, and we had an assembly, and we had five upper school students. So these are 10th, 11th, and 12th graders talking to middle school kids about what they remember, sort of the mean behavior they remember participating in when they were in middle school, how mean they were, how cruel they were, how cliquish they were, some of the really harmful out of bounds language that they used. Only one of those five kids was an upstander. Only one of the five was like, I remember thinking that was mean and I wasn't going to behave that way. But the other four were pretty forthright in talking about how cruel they were. And you can imagine how powerful it is for 12 and 13-year-olds to hear kids that are just a few years older expressing regret about how they treated one another and how they wish they would have treated their peers, and now how they think about those middle school experiences. So that was organized by one of our AAA members, mentors who moderated the conversation, sort of like a fishbowl. But it was incredible. I mean, an amazing experience, and they connected like power to language. So then in December, we introduced the idea of microaggressions. Now, a lot of our kids already know what they were, but many did not know what microaggressions were. And we did that through interact like class meetings, so the entire sixth grade or entire seventh grade, but interactions and very active, them trying to brainstorm what are microaggressions and why. And we talked about they're micro because they happen all the time, but they're very small, but they build up over time, and they actually have a long-term impact on one's mental well-being. And then that led us to the January conversations about just joking, because of course, anytime you call someone out on a microaggression, their response is, "Oh, I'm just joking," or you're really my friend. I would, yeah, I'm just kidding around." How do you deal with someone who's always just joking? This is prevalent in schools, and so that led us to February, March, where we learned to disrupt the microaggressions. What do you actually say when someone's like, "Oh, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking with you." And so, and I'm going to show you a slide in a minute. about the framing for how you disrupt microaggressions. But just to sort of wrap it up, in April, so a week from this Friday, we're having Acacia Day. That word acacia is a very strong tree with very deep roots, but that word acacia has three A's in it. That's our AAA program. It has two C's. That's cultural competency, and that lowercase I is identity. It's about the self. So that word acacia represents everything that we want in our programs. And next Friday, or a week from this Friday, Acacia Day is going to be about the positive weight of words. So it's going to be all about how good words can be and how positive they can be. And every AAA group is going to go do some different activity during the day. So that's how we're going to wrap it up. And then we will survey the kids at the end of the year. Next slide, please. So this is the framework for how to disrupt harmful language. If you hear a microaggression, the first thing you have to do is interrupt it. And there's lots of ways you could do that. You could do to make a timeout. You could say whoa, or you could say bro, or dude, or huh? You just need one word or one gesture to disrupt it. And you got to practice it, right? You have to practice it. The second way is to question. What do you mean by that? Or that's interesting. Why did you say that? The third would be to educate. Well, do you know what that word actually means? Or do you know where that word comes from? And then echo is just to back something that someone else says. So if someone else says whoa, you would be like, yeah, whoa. Because echoing is someone else that disrupts it. Um, these things are not easy to do for adults or for kids and require practice. And so that's why we've done this one like we're going to do our third one coming up. And you just have to keep practicing a microaggression and then a disruption and what it sounds like and what it feels like in your body. It has to be automatic. Um, and that's what we're trying to engender in our kids. Okay, next slide. So that is an image of some people building a plane while they're flying it, which describes this program. Again, it's not like I woke up and had some great vision, but we got some people together over the summer and said, let's put together these activities to help kids understand the weight of words. And we're trying it this year, and I think it's going very well. But I'm sure that we're going to discover that it's faulty in so many ways, but it doesn't matter. We're trying it, we're doing it, and we're learning as we go along. This summer, we're gonna have another group do Weight of Words 2.0 to sort of reconfigure how we do it. Next slide, please. Um, these are not, look, we're only looking at the data for 7 months so far, but we have actually seen a drop in racial incidents, homophobic incidents, and body shaming incidents compared with last year. And we're always looking at the data to make sure it reflects what we think is happening in schools. But so far so good. And I know we are going into the three. March, April, May, June. 45% of our serious discipline happens in April, May, and June. I'm aware of that, but our fingers are crossed. Next slide, please. So here are 6 things I think that you could do this year. If you're wondering, what do I do? Where do I start? I have 6 suggestions. So the first is just start small, right? Acknowledge your blind spots and commit to learning as you grow. Next, study the neurology of belonging. That's your brain science. It's really important that you and your people understand that the mind cannot learn as long as an individual doesn't feel safe. That's physically, intellectually, or emotionally. And I recommend Zaretta Hammond's book. I also recommend the website of the CTTL. That is the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning. It's at St. Andrew's School in Potomac, Maryland. They're doing some incredible work on the braid, right? Academic belonging and social belonging, and they're like my latest crush, the CTTL, and I've been spending a lot of time on their site and talking to their people, and they're really good. And like the brain piece is just essential in schools right now. We have to know how the brain works so that we're teaching in healthy, productive ways. So allow your most passionate people to try new things. Your teachers come with great ideas. You say, "Great, let's run with it." We as administrators, we don't have to come up with every idea ourselves. Um, And when there's pushback, we can't do that, or that's too hard, that's going to require too much time. Make sure that you qualify that resistance. What is that really about? Um, because I think if you make sure that you're putting students at the center, if students are telling you this is what's happening in school, and your teachers are like, I mean, I don't know how you would respond to saying, well, we just can't take that on this year if kids are suffering in school in any way. And so I think resistance might be easier to overcome, especially if you keep kids at the center. Next, survey your students and gather feedback. I mean, it feels really important. Figure out what their experience is, and then you take that to your faculty and say, what are we going to do about this? Next, consider doing this in affinity groups. I know, I mean, our affinity groups have bore so much fruit for us in so many ways. I almost can't imagine what school would be like if we didn't have our affinity, our AAA group, so affinity, ally, and advocacy group. So, if anyone is worried about how to get that launched, call me and we could talk about it. And the next one. Write yourself a note that says, I know, or I knew that by addressing hurtful language in our school, we were going to uncover a great many more ugly things. And things have gotten ugly, but this is the right thing to do, even if we can't always do it perfectly. That's the little pep talk you're going to build in for yourself and keep it somewhere on your desk so that when things go really poorly, and they're going to, because this is hard, this is really difficult stuff. But when they go poorly, you say, we're doing the right thing. And growth mindset. We have to stick to it. Maintain your humility and remember that we have a long way to go and that you got this. Okay. So next, I think so that's where we are. It's 1:42. I think we should do Q&A right now. Um, and I know I just threw a lot of information there.
No, it was great, Josh. I think you shared a lot that our schools can take back. And even if you're not in a school setting, I think you had a lot of learnings. But yeah, I think we can open it up to anyone who has any questions, comments, feedback, want to share how they're feeling, with what Josh presented.
Could you briefly talk about the affinity, the AAA, how you set it up?
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that it was three A's, not just affinity. The ally groups and the advocacy groups were really important to make sure that the parents that were concerned that we were, I don't know, brainwashing kids in some way, we wanted to make sure there was an outlet for all kinds of kids. Now, the kids naturally will gravitate towards the affinity groups, but we wanted to make sure that we had sort of fair offering across the board. Um, the first year, we created a slide deck and we showed the slide deck at an assembly and we said, this is the reason why we're creating this program. We're creating it so that students can build belonging, can get together with other different kinds of kids that have similarities with them, shared interests or affinities. So we were very clear about articulating why we're building the program. And then we made a slide deck and shared what all of the different affinity groups could be. And we had to survey our faculty and say, who wants to, what affinity group might you be willing to mentor? We also had a DEI director that built kind of a playbook. So, what do you do in your AAA groups? Like, what do you do the first day you get together? And so, I really just started with a lot of icebreakers, getting to know you. You have to do a lot of that so that you build some rapport so kids get to feel comfortable. And then in the second year, the students led the assembly. So imagine three kids from the Black Male Forum got on the stage and say, "Hey, if you're a young black man, you should join the Black Male Forum, and this is why it's so cool, and this is all the activities that we did this year." And then the next group gets up. When kids see other kids presenting, they're much more enthusiastic about it. So. I mean, that's a really simplified version. And if you want to talk more, email me and we could talk.
So,
Josh, you had one question. I'm sorry, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
sorry, I just wanted to ask that for each affinity, AAA group, were they just faculty or did you get parent who were mentors?
Only faculty. My gosh, no, I would never bring parents in on this. Yeah, because you hear a lot of things. You hear a lot of things. Do all students join an affinity group? Yes, it's mandatory. Every student has to be a part of either affinity, ally, or advocacy. So like we have a sustainability group. We have a advocacy Baltimore group. We have like a safe spaces group, one that's affinity. That's like our LGBTQ plus, but then we also have like a safe spaces alliance group. So kids that want to support that group but aren't in the group. Because affinity is really only for people that belong in that group of that whatever identifying mark identifier.
Josh, you had a question here. Can you expand on the just joking element?
Um, Expand on it. Well, just joking is the standard response anytime kids get called in for their language, with adults or with kids. So student says something harmful, actually any human being says something harmful and someone says, what do you mean by that? And the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, I'm just joking. That's our natural defense mechanism. And we often don't have the courage to then go past that. Someone's like, oh, just joking. And then kids walk away. And always when you bring kids in and you say, well, didn't you speak up for yourself? They, yeah, I told them, I said I didn't like it. You calling me names. I said, what'd you do? I said, well, I said he didn't like it. And what he said? He said, well, he was just joking. And then what'd you say? I didn't say anything. I just walked away. That's how it happens in our hallways, or in the cafeteria or in the locker room. So we wanted something that they could do to come back to that just joking. Well, hey, did you know did you know what that expression means, or did you know that actually is hurtful, or whoa, time out, like that's not okay. And so we just wanted kids to be able to push a little bit farther and call it out, because just joking is just the pat response, right? I hope I answered that question.
Any other questions for Josh? I know we're getting ready to wrap up.
Real quickly, for you ladies, when I registered for this, they had lots of dates given. So is this like a progressive, or is it the same thing?
Yeah, no, so that was a great question. We do weekly webinars, and so every webinar will be a different topic. And so when you're registering to be a part of all our weekly webinars. And so each topic is different, but we do send an email out every week with what's coming up. Great question.
Let me, can you go, let's see. We had some questions, but we can go to the last slide that just has my name and my email if people want to,
Yep.
yeah, there you go. So there's my name, there's my email. If you want to, if you have questions about any of these things, I know I moved very quickly through it. But I hope that it was helpful and encourages you to take it on.
And speaking of that, Josh, would love to have you back for the 2.0 program and just sharing what, has been your learning as you've progressed. I think everyone would be interested in, following the journey. All right. But before we wrap up, and if there aren't any other questions, or if there are, just put them in the chat. So two things. One of the six things that Josh mentioned was being able to survey your students and gather feedback. And so we do have a tool called Parsec Real where you can gather feedback at scale. And so there's a quiz that's going to pop up if you would like to learn more about how we can help support and collect student feedback. Definitely go ahead and leave your name and your email, and then we'll follow up with you. The second thing is at our 2024 Measure What We Value Summit, we talked heavily about harmful language, and there's a video that we created as a resource to really help schools understand the effects that it has on kids, to what Josh said. And so Kim will drop the link in the chat. You can put in your information and you'll be able to access the video. We encourage you all to use it as a training resource with your staff. It is an amazing, really thought-provoking video, and so definitely encourage you all to download that. And I think that was it before I pass it back to Josh for his last words. We just thank you all for joining us on this webinar Wednesday. This topic is something that is really, really important for us. And so being able to create this space where we can learn from leaders like you all who are doing this is something that we're very proud of. But with that, we'll have our webinar next Wednesday, and we thank you all. we will send the recording and the slides. And Josh, we thank you for joining us. Is there anything you want to say before we let everyone go?
No, Shay, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this learning community. I really appreciate it. And you asking me to put this together also helped me to formulate and put together what looks like a trajectory. I know it all looks like it was all one vision, but it's rarely one vision. And so if you all as school leaders have an idea of some, just try it, go for it. And if you don't have any ideas, your people most certainly do. So be willing to take some risks. And this is um, attacking is a bad verb, sort of addressing harmful language. This is pervasive in our culture today, right? I mean, we're seeing it, and it's not getting better. It's getting more and more difficult. And so we have to be really deliberate about how we're talking about language with children, and we can't underestimate anything that we say ever. They're sponges. They absorb every single thing that we do all the time. And so the more deliberate and careful we can be about what we say, it's going to be effective. So I appreciate everyone that's an educator, everyone that works with young people. It's the most noble of professions. So thank you all for coming today.
Definitely agree with you, Josh. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you all next week, and you all will get a recording of the slides and everything. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and your Wednesday.